Hello, this is Ben Moore, Finance Manager for the Office of Community Assistance, and this video will help walk you through budgeting for the travel and training line items on the GATA budget spreadsheet for the 2021 CSBG grant. The budget line items that this video will be dealing with are 103 and 112 for program support and 303 and 312 for the administration category. For travel, the items that must be charged to admin are the cost as listed below, which exceed the $7,500 TNTA limit for line 402. And what I mean by that is that each grantee for the 2021 CSBG grant will be allotted $7,500 specifically for training and technical assistance in the line 402 of your budget. And the costs for travel and training the initial costs are intended to be charged to the 402 line item. Any excess, once you've budgeted that line item, belong in the appropriate travel or training category. So the items that must be charged to admin for this grant are lodging, per diem, and transportation costs for the administrative staff while attending trainings, conferences, and performing assigned grant program activities. And all board member travel expenses must also be charged to the administration category for this budget. The minimum requirements for the cost grid for this tab are that the basis can be items such as lodging per night, per diem, fuel charges, mileage, train ticket, airplane expenses, or airplane ticket costs, taxis, etc. The lodging, per diem, and transportation costs should be listed as separate items for each conference, not just a lump sum. So I don't want to see CAPLA conference and all the costs for that. We really do need the lodging, the per diem, and the transportation costs all listed separately on the travel tab for each individual conference. The minimum requirements for the narrative section. You need to explain the number of people traveling and the number of nights or days, etc., that they will be staying. For the lodging, per diem, and mileage, the rates may not exceed the federal travel rates, which is a requirement of this grant. If staff travel mileage rate is budgeted, you must state travel mileage rate is reimbursement for mileage when an employee is using their personal vehicle for grant program activities. So that's if you're budgeting for a mileage rate for an individual. The items to be included in travel in general are the costs, again, cost as listed below, which exceed. So once you've expended all your 402 or budgeted all the costs in your 402 TNTA line item, then you would charge costs here as appropriate. So again, there's the lodging, per diem, transportation costs for staff while attending training, conferences, and performing assigned grant program activities. Fuel for agency vehicles used for their assigned grant program activities, potentially going to a shut-in customer, a homebound customer, or anything relating to assisting customers during your course of your work. Mileage used to reimburse employees using their own vehicles for their assigned grant program activities. So it's you're either charging the cost related to an agency vehicle or mileage if an individual is using their own. This category should also include conference and training fees. The conference and training fees must be charged to training and education. So even though it may seem like part of the travel costs when you're going to a conference for the conference fee or the registration fee for that conference, those costs actually need to be charged to training and education, which is 112 or 312, depending on which, if it's admin or program support. And again, these charges could also be charged to the 402 TNTA line if you have available funding. So this does not include travel expenses paid to consultants. So if you have travel for a consultant, it does not go on the travel line, it goes on the consultant line, which is 107 if it's a program support consultant cost, or 307 if it's admin. Here's an example of how the cost grid might be completed for travel. So in this case, it's the WIPLE conference in Chicago. And so for the conference, if you'll notice, they break out, instead of just saying WIPLE conference, it's a lump charge. They have the lodging per night, the number of nights. They have per diem, they have mileage or train ticket costs. for each individual conference. And here was a workshop, OCA workshop, same thing. They break it down by the type of cost. And then the narrative says the weekly costs are based on 3 days, per diem, 2 nights, 2 people attending, and they give the name of the, so I would, you would give the name of the individuals attending the conference. And then for the workshop, you would say who's attending and how long, that type of thing. So the next budget category we're going to address is training and education, which are lines 112 and 312. Again, items that must be charged to admin. If you spend up your TNTA in 402, then the overflow costs would go here. They would, as far as admin, the registration costs for administrative staff and board members who are attending training and conferences, those costs would go under the admin category, which is 312. The minimum requirements for the cost grid on this budget category are you need to list the registration fees for each conference or training separately. You need to use the quantity column to show the number of attendees. For the basis, you would write in a registration fee per person or cost per person. And in the cost column, you would use the amount per person, or you would enter the amount per person. The minimum requirements for the narrative section of this budget category are that you must list the individual conferences or trainings budgeted and the number of staff attending each. And I went through a small example of how you might enter that. And then you also need to provide the rationale for attending the conference or training. The general items to be included in training and education are, again, any training costs that exceed the $7,500 that you've been given in the 402 line item. It would include registration costs for staff attending and training conferences. It would include training materials, say pamphlets, notebooks, videos, and other various handouts that you as an agency order for specifically for training activities at your agency. You do not include travel costs in training and education. Again, those the travel costs for a conference or training need to go into 103 or 303, and the actual registration and the cost for the conference itself go into the 112 and the 312 category for training and education. And you do not include salaries and fringe in either the training, education, or the travel categories. They all must be budgeted if they're agency employees to the 101 and 301 for personnel, and 102 and 302 for fringe. Again, there are separate videos available as guides to completing each of the individual cost tabs in the budget spreadsheet, and I encourage you to watch the other videos available. Thank you for watching.